Hello everyone, I'm Tamika Weatherspoon. Joining us one-on-one is author Elizabeth Cohen, who is the writer of The Hypothetical Girl and also a professor at SUNY Plattsburgh. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tamika.
So let's talk about your book. What is a hypothetical girl?
A hypothetical girl is a person who does not really exist, but is someone you read about on the internet or see a text about or see on an online dating site. So you assume this person is real because you'd like to believe that people are real, but in essence they don't really exist until you really meet them.
What was your reaction to finding out that your book was selected by Oprah as a must-read for this fall?
Well, I think every author would agree, with the exception of Jonathan Franzen, who did not want to be selected by Oprah's book club. But most of us are really happy when anybody suggests our book or puts our book out there in the limelight, and Oprah has the ability to do that through her magazine to many, many millions of readers and on her internet site as well. So I was delighted and shocked, frankly, and it was fun for me too because I have a 14-year-old daughter who just thought that was the coolest thing ever. So,
how did you come up with the idea for this book?
Well, I was dating on the internet after my marriage fell apart, and I was older. I was in midlife and a single mother, and so I wasn't as fluent in online etiquette and all the things that people know. So for me, there was a huge learning curve, and when I would meet people, I started to realize that there was a disconnect between the actual person and the person that you see described almost in an advertisement of a person on the internet. And when I would read people's stories as I was searching for someone for myself, I realized that I was really more interested in their stories than I was in them. And I found that it was a really rich vein of material, and I was curious about these things people said about themselves. Like, how does somebody craft a story about themselves so quickly to entice another person to want to get to know them? So I started getting ideas that weren't real ideas, that were not things I was actually experiencing, for ways that that stories that I could write would emerge. And I started writing these stories like 2.5 years ago, and they just flooded through me really fast, and I wanted to write more and more and more of them.
Let's talk about online dating, because I was reading in the paper there's such a surge in popularity in online dating. I think they said 1/3 of marriages in the US start online these days. What's the real culture of online dating that you found in your experience?
Well, first of all, I didn't know that 1/3 of marriages came about that way. That's happy news to me, because I think there's just as many that do not go forward. But I do know that millions of people are meeting online on all these dating sites like Match.com. I think it's changing the ways that love works, and the way it's more of a strategic thing now than it used to be. When my parents met, they met just in the real world, in an office setting. People meet in cocktail hours, people meet in bars, and just through friends. People are set up on dates. This is definitely different from that. This is where you meet, but you don't see the person. And you meet their idea of themselves, or their idea of what they want to represent as themselves, and sometimes that may not be whom they really turn out to be.
Can you share with us one of your favorite stories from the book?
The book has stories in it that are realistic stories, and it also has stories about things that could never happen, what we call in literature magical realist stories. And so one of my favorite stories in the book, and one that that people have been talking about a lot, is one in which a polar bear and a deer meet on the internet on a website called stupidhumans.com, which is a website that animals communicate on about things that bother them about humans. And they fall in love with one another. And that story, a lot of people enjoy it because they misunderstand one another constantly throughout the story. And that's a lot like what love is like.
The way we communicate has changed, and the way we have discussions through email and texting. What do you think that's done to relationships? You've compared that to your parents and how they met.
Yeah.
How does it change the way that we get to know each other?
I think that it really has changed the way we get to know one another. Back to the story of deer and polar bear, they communicate through texts, through emails, and on this online site, stupidhumans.com. And it brings up the issue that I think most of us know about when we text one another, which is that you entirely miss tone and facial expressions and body language. So when my parents met one another, they met in real time, in the real world, and they were able to judge and see for themselves who the other person was. Deer and polar bear do not meet in real life, so there's constantly misunderstandings, not only due to the fact that they're different species and genders and live in different parts of the world, but also just the way that you can completely misunderstand a text. As anyone who's ever texted knows, somebody might think you're angry when you're just trying to be funny, and these are the things that our body language and our faces and our tone communicate that are completely lost online.
So much of this book is about romance in the digital age, but it's also in part about identity. So talk about the tendency to slightly misrepresent yourself or drastically misrepresent yourself online.
That was the core issue I was interested in exploring in my book, was the ways that we define ourselves as human beings when we go on the internet to find another person. And what I found was that people have an opportunity through their online profile to craft an identity that is their perfect person, or whom they think that the world would find a perfect person. So these are very carefully crafted things, and people put in what they think other people will be attracted to. Like, I do yoga, I love hiking, you know, the most important thing in the world to me is to be out on a morning walk with my dogs. And this might be somebody who has not done yoga lately, hasn't been on a walk with their dogs lately, and in the worst case scenario, doesn't even have a dog. They just put that in there. This just really tweaks identity in a strange way, because who we really are may not be who we want to be, but the online profile gives us an opportunity to create that person we've always wanted to be, that we think other people will react well to.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tamika.